Hello and welcome back to my LinkedIn Lives. I'm Jasmine Navarro, certified wellbeing expert, working with teenagers and adults, helping them with not all, their wellbeing challenges in educational institutions and companies. And as you know, every week I interview different experts who make a difference on people's lives. And today I'm super excited to be interviewing a very good friend of mine and an amazing expert, Jen, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Thank you, Jasmine. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to have these chats with you. So I'm a career and mindset coach. I was also a lawyer in a previous profession, so I kind of understand the strains of workplace emotions, which is the topic for today. But really, what I focus on now is helping people find a career they love, and that can be young people to help them find what makes them tick. And go there with confidence. And it can be people mid-career who don't feel motivated or inspired by the job they do now, and want something new, and want to get to feel unstuck. I guess that's where I come in.
It's so important, isn't it, to enjoy what you do, because, well, we spend so much time doing it. But the title you chose, so emotions in the workplace and how they can actually help us. Can you tell us a bit more about this title and why you chose it for our talk today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the title came from what I've learned basically from the years of coaching now that I have behind me and helping so many people in their careers. One thing that I've noticed is the bad rep that emotions have. We always have this feeling that we somehow shouldn't feel certain emotions at work and that we should leave them behind at the door. And one thing I wanted to start today's chat with just debunking that completely and just saying that we can't do that. Biologically, we cannot do that. Humans are emotional beings, and it's one of the components of our metabolism. So we really need to just acknowledge the fact that our emotions are going to follow us wherever we go throughout the day. So once we make that decision, I think it's important to sort of pause and then think, well, okay, if we now accept the fact that we're going to have emotions throughout the day, how are we going to deal with them? So that's what led to this chat today, was how to help us deal with emotions positively, also particularly in an environment that we found difficult, which is work.
Amazing. Let me just say hi, Baruz. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. And hi to everybody who's joined us. Please feel free to ask us questions and tell us what you think as well. We always love hearing other people's opinions. Yeah, so no, I think I love what you said about, and you know, when you were saying it, I just thought it's so simple, actually. Just, yeah, we are human beings and we do have emotions and we do have to accept them. And you just think, what have we been doing all these years? Like trying to suppress who we are. Yeah, it's just insane. And of course, it's going to have negative consequences if we're not accepting who we are as being. It's crazy, really. But so there's so many things I want to ask you. So I don't know, where do we start, actually?
I think that's a good question, because obviously emotions are so pervasive and they come in everywhere. I think the bit that I wanted to really get, the message I wanted to get across today was, first of all, the first one that I said, which is emotion. Let's stop the idea that we're going to be able to stop our emotions from influencing how we are at work, because that's just not possible. And they're going to come up at work and outside of work. And the first thing I notice when working with clients who want to change careers, for example, is when they're making that decision, they are in a feeling usually very low emotionally. They're feeling stuck, powerless, out of control, demotivated, and they've lost touch with themselves, what they love, who they are. And that's why they come to me. And one of the things that I want to give them as we work together is that ability to get themselves out of a funk in the future on their own and build that emotional intelligence for themselves. That's effectively what we're talking about. And what is emotional intelligence? It's the ability to manage and understand and process your own emotions, to use them positively. And then that also includes as well then understanding other people's emotions and helping relationships around. So we can see how that would be really important in a workplace, for example, but
Definitely.
also just generally in life.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying, well, awareness. I know it always comes back to awareness, doesn't it? So awareness is absolutely key.
Yeah.
It's always awareness, isn't it? But it sounds so simple, awareness, but actually to get to that awareness is a long old journey, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can take quite a lot of time, and it's also something we have to do intentionally. So again, we have to be aware that we want to become self-aware. And that's where also sometimes having a coach or having somebody outside can help, is because it helps you to bounce, basically it helps this other person to be the mirror that it's difficult sometimes to be for ourselves. We don't always realize the assumptions that we make, the thought patterns that we have. So having somebody to mirror it is very useful. But we can also there's a lot of things we can do ourselves. And that's kind of what I wanted to help people with today. If maybe I can share a message here today, be how to help you to do it yourself.
Definitely. What, do you want to tell us that now, or you mean throughout the conversation?
Throughout the conversation.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were going to say, oh, here's a secret tip. But like you were saying, for some people who maybe they don't talk about this very much, and maybe they're just not very aware, because I think a lot of people are not aware about this actually, and I think that's a normal thing, isn't it? Because it's not something we learn unless we go out and sort of find this knowledge.
100%.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So for somebody who doesn't really know the benefits of being emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent, like how does all of that, like you were saying, the ability to understand what we're feeling, process our feelings in a healthy way, how would that help how does that help anyone in the workplace? Like how does it have an impact?
That's a wonderful question. So I guess it's if I give you an example, maybe that can help. So imagine we go into work and we've had, I don't know, a fight with our partner. We've not slept well because either the baby's been screaming, or like me, my cat's been bringing in mice all night, and we've had to deal with that. And so you're feeling a bit tired, and you're feeling a little bit angry, maybe a bit insecure because of that conversation you had with your partner. And you go into work, and then other things happen at work, and maybe you have a big decision to make at work, whether, for example, to fire somebody. That could be, somebody else's life is also in the balance there. And you can sometimes bring some of all of these negative emotions in your decision making at work. And it's very hard to know in that moment, if you're not pausing to really reflect on what is making you feel like that, whether it's the person who's irritating you and continues to irritate you, and whether it's the person at work who maybe is underperforming, or is it actually that person, or is it you being more sensitive to whatever is happening at work? And that can really have a huge impact on the decision making, your enjoyment at work, the decisions you make at work, and also other people's lives, i.e. that other person at work. Does that make sense when I'm explaining that?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, no, it does. No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And okay, so it affects, like you said, our decision making. Like that.
Yeah, that's the core. That's one of the core things. So it affects our experience at work. So that's maybe the first thing. So it can create a good day or a bad day. So if we can choose how we want to show up at work, then we can create for ourselves much more opportunity and motivation. So one of the first things I do with my clients before they make a big decisions as to changing their careers, for example, is helping them make small changes in their life to help them see if actually it's the work, or if there's other things going on that's impacting how they feel about their work.
And in your experience, is it normally other things that are happening as well, or is it?
There's always a mixture of both.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things to do is probably to check in with yourself. Am I overworking? Am I creating enough personal time for myself? Am I, am I neglecting my mental health, my physical health? That can also have a huge impact on whether you're going to feel burnt out, whether you're going to enjoy what you do at work. Am I setting the right boundaries for myself?
Oh, yeah.
And am I developing things I enjoy? When was the last time I did something outside of work that I really enjoyed?
Amazing. Yeah, just these simple, powerful questions.
Yeah.
And Baru says, is it true that workplace determines home mood and vice versa? Very good question. Thank you, Baru.
Yeah. So whether workplace determines home mood and vice versa. So to an extent, yes, because we're human. So one thing we always do is we tend to try and separate personal life and work life. And my biggest overall experience from working with hundreds of people now is that we are one person and we have one life. And so what happens in one tends to have consequences in the other. And one of the things that when I notice that some people are confused or feeling stuck or unfulfilled at work, my first focus of curiosity is what's going on in the other areas of your life.
Definitely.
And often when we build on these other areas and we refocus the mind on something else, weirdly enough, it unsticks what's in work.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's a shift in perspective there.
Definitely. And I've learned a lot about that as well through coaching as well, because I know, like, if I had a limiting belief in one area of my life, I just always remember, especially during the training, the trainers would say, where else in your life are you feeling that way, or you have those thoughts? And it would be like, that would be so transformational, just to even know, wow, the way I'm thinking here is actually how I show up here is how I show up there. Like you said, everything's connected, isn't it? Of course, we can't separate. And I think it's like when we're trying to separate ourselves from our emotions, we are our emotions, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think if we stop seeing it as two separate entities and we start looking at our life as a whole, and as a balance that we need to hold as a whole, rather than two separate balances, it does help. It does help people feel more fulfilled and as a person. So when you look at, for example, if you're feeling like you're not learning enough at work, there are certain things, growth is one of the big values of a lot of humans out there, and that need to grow and to learn is often one of the reasons actually that people feel unhappy at work, is when they don't feel they can progress, or they don't feel they can learn. Definitely. And that's one of the big things that I hear coming back. And one of the tricks that helps sometimes is also like, what could you do? Like, often we think we have only two options. One option is, quitting the job or staying in the job and being unfulfilled. And often there are other options. And what we do in coaching is also obviously explore the other options. And for example, starting something like a side project on which you have control. For example, I had a client who started writing a book, or who decided to go part-time to start her own business. It changed her whole dynamic about how she felt about her job.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because that's the black or white thinking, isn't it? It's like, okay, I can do that, this or that, and there's sort of nothing else. And I think it comes again from the awareness, because when you have more awearness, you can actually see more, can't you?
100%.
Open to more.
Absolutely. And that's what kind of why we're talking about emotions at work, is to allow us to make more empowered decisions, seeing more. It's as if we switch off our emotions, or we try and switch off our emotions, it's as if we're trying to we are trying to see a whole equation, but we're missing parts of the equation. We're being like, oh, I'm not going to listen to this part, I'm just going to listen to this part.
Yeah.
And so it's so sad, because we're missing out on a big reason why we make the decision in the first place.
Wow, it's so powerful. And actually, our emotions have key information and messages that will help us.
100%. The image I give often is, for example, imagine that we didn't feel pain. And there are some people out there actually who struggle with feeling pain. But imagine physical pain, how useful that is. I put my hand on the stove. Oh, it hurts. You remove this hand from the stove. If you didn't feel the pain, you'd leave your hand on the stove, and it would continue and suffer and probably get really, really bad over time. It's the same thing with emotions. I see emotions as cues, and it gives us information. And it's always helpful. The question is to see what is helpful to the situation you're in. So, for example, at work, you could feel like, oh, okay, I'm feeling really angry about something. Yeah. If you just take a moment, and that's what we were talking before we met up, like today, about pausing. If we take a moment and just pause and be like, okay, what's the emotion I'm feeling right now? What triggered it? Oh, actually, it was triggered like outside of work. It was triggered about something that had nothing to do with the situation I'm in right now. It might not be a useful emotion right now in the decision or in the situation you're in.
Yeah.
So being aware of that might help you make decisions that are actually more helpful to you and the people around you in the workplace.
Definitely. And of course, emotions help us know when we maybe need to set a boundary. Like, for example, when you're saying, if you suddenly feel angry at something, it could be something to do with something that's just happened, or it could be a present reaction. And it could be, okay, I need to set a boundary here because something is, so like you said, emotions are cues. They tell us, they give us, is it not advice or
data, information?
Information that there's an action that we can take to
exactly. And it has meaning. So it could be, for example, I feel like negative emotions such as, for example, envy. Envy gets a huge bad press. But if you look at envy independently of like any action that you're taking in relation to the envy, and you just, okay, I'm feeling envious of this other person. If you ask yourself, why am I feeling envious? Suddenly that opens up a lot of information in relation to what you want for yourself. So, for example, you could be looking at, I had a client who was a lawyer like me, and I know I was a lawyer and I had that same issue. When I was looking around at other lawyers, I was thinking, yeah, that's great, they've done really well, and I was feeling impressed by them, but I wasn't feeling anything more than that. And then when I saw people who had their own businesses, who had the flexibility of time, who decided who they wanted to work with, there was this kind of green envy inside of my stomach, something that really was getting to me. And if I paused to ask myself why, it was just because that was something I wanted to do. That was something that inspired me. And it allowed me to know what my next step was. And so I, instead of using it negatively and just being resentful, it was about getting curious about it and actually being like, okay, actually it's something I want.
Amazing. I absolutely love that. And that's just one.
That's just one thing. Yeah, exactly.
One time and actually helped you make a big decision for your life.
Yeah.
This is absolutely huge. And so let's talk a bit more about the power of the pause, because I really think that can really change your life as well, can't it? Because of course, if you learn to, respond rather than react, I mean, that sets your whole life up on a different path as well, doesn't it? So is there anything else you want to say about that?
Yes. I mean, I think that's the first thing that when I work with clients, so I was saying one of the first thing was to help them reconnect with what they've with their personal life, with what they love, with taking care of themselves, so that when they show up at work, they show up as the better version of themselves. So that's the first step that I do with them. And then the second step is once they show up as the best version of themselves, and they maybe take some actions, for example, to be able to take control of certain things again at work, taking some initiatives, starting to learn again, seeing if the work, making the most of the workplace. Then we start also working on their own internal dialogue, so their own internal thoughts. And one of the big first steps is to pause when you feel something. And one of the things that I suggest, sometimes it's hard to do it in the moment, but you can do it afterwards. That's okay as well. But it doesn't take long. It can take literally 30 seconds. And you feel, okay, I'm actually feeling a bit uncomfortable right now. I'm feeling really anxious. What's just happened that's made me feel anxious? And that's the pausing. It's okay, I'm feeling anxious. First, I've named what's happening. I haven't just brushed it away. I've named what's happening. Then I've asked myself, what was the trigger? What's the thing that made me feel anxious? Okay, it's what my boss just said. Okay, what is it about what my boss just said that's getting me anxious? And then, he said something in a way that made me feel like he thought I was dumb. Something like that. Yeah. And then you'd be like, okay, what's the thought I've told myself? I'm dumb. He thinks I'm dumb. Okay, I've just told myself that. So obviously that's how I'm going to be feeling. And then it's about asking yourself first, is it true? I don't know. haven't had this chat. I've just made an assumption in my head.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it's about pausing and not maybe taking a walk or pausing for a few minutes. And then once you've calmed down that spike of emotion and you've actually realized where it's coming from, you can then either have a conversation with that person that's going to be helpful, being like, you said X. What did you mean by X? Oh, it might be completely different from what I've interpreted. And we often tend to interpret things negatively.
Normally it's always different. What you're assuming is it's very rarely.
But if we don't do that, a series of times when we end up doing that becomes a huge frustration at work. And that can make you and drive employees out and drive you and thinking that you hate what you do.
Yes.
Just because you have that problem with that person, for example.
You're right. Let's just go to some of these questions. So Baruz, I think he's had to leave, unfortunately, but Baruz says, is it possible to be happy in work but be unhappy in your home?
If yes, why and how? Is it possible to be happy at work and unhappy at home? Yeah, it's obviously, yes, it's possible to feel like that. It doesn't mean that, there might be different things going on in different areas of your life.
And it depends where you're focused, because sometimes if you're having problems at home, of course, we can't separate everything. But if you're very happy at work, of course, that's going to help, isn't it? Because you can focus, your focus is in a different place. What you focus on does affect how you feel as well.
100%. But one thing that you said earlier that I think is relevant here, Jasmine, is when you said about, where else in your life are you seeing that you're doing that? And very, very often our thought processes and what we do in terms of coping mechanisms, for example, some people have trouble, and I know I did, asking for help, for example, that will usually be pervasive in every area of your life.
Definitely.
And even if you feel happy at work, it doesn't mean that you can't be even happier. It can't mean that it can't be even better. So that's usually, and these things is going to have an impact.
And sorry, if you're like really, really, really unhappy at home, and if you feel like you're happy at work, maybe you're not even happy at work. It's just because you're so unhappy at home that seems like you're happy at work.
It can be an escape.
Yeah.
And that's where learning to know your emotions, to understand where the unhappiness is coming from, where that is coming from, and what is triggering it, and what is your own assumption or your own internalization of that, and what is actually true.
Yeah, exactly. And Baruz said, sorry, should leave. Thank you so much for joining us, Baruz. It was lovely to have you there. Hi, Dr. Sigu. Before that one question, sorry. It is a lack which results in envy, for example. So because you were mentioning about feeling envy, and Dr. Sigu said it's a lack which results in envy. Do you feel that?
Yes, it can be. So it's often something that we want more of in our life, and we have a choice. So the emotion in itself is like the pain of removing the hand from the stove. The question is, do we make the conscious decision to leave the hand on the stove and suffer, or do we actually remove the hand and we make a decision to do something different?
Amazing.
And that's so scary sometimes, right? Because it means getting the courage to do things that can be really difficult. But if you know why, it makes it easier.
That's true. And it's all about making conscious choices, not just living on repeat and not even realizing, which is actually more scary. Pause requires after habitual practice.
So I don't know what he means there, but I'm assuming that what he means is that.
Actually, I think this is what he said again.
Yes. Okay. Does pause require habitual practice? Yes, it does.
Definitely.
It needs to be conscious, and that's why often that's part of what we do in the coaching, like in coaching relationship, as the homework that we give between sessions sometimes. So it can be something like, for example, in the next week, if you could, like 3 times that you notice that you're feeling something at work, try and pause in that moment and ask yourself the list of questions that I gave earlier. What's the emotion? What triggered it? What is the thought that accompanies it? Is it a true thought?
And maybe you could write that on the post as well, because I think those questions would be really useful. Yeah.
Thanks,
Jen. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And it's like everything, isn't it? Like we already have all of these habits of maybe not acknowledging our emotions. So it's about changing our habits, creating our habits. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just writing it down.
That's okay. You won't be able to write it on this chat, but you'd have to do it on the LinkedIn one.
On the LinkedIn one. Okay, I'll do that.
Later, yeah. And emotions are data. Thank you very much, Phoebe. Lovely to have you here. Yes, emotions are data. And everyone's so like, it's all about data, isn't it? And it's like,
we're scared of emotional data.
No, we are like a bundle of data when you think about it. Let's use us. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something I often actually like when working with people who are sometimes brainy people, like I say, like people in professions that are maybe more intellectual professions. I've worked a lot with lawyers as well. And I know that there is sometimes a reservation about things like coaching or a reservation around emotions and all that language that is, more emotional and less brainy, right? That's how we feel. But there's a part of our brain that deals with emotions. It's actually like completely fake to be saying that it's not brainy. But when I sort of explain to them in a very mathematical way that, if you have an equation and you want the right result, you have to take into account all of the data, all of the information that you have, and you'll have a much better look at it. So once they sort of reframe it into that, and suddenly we do a few examples and they see how adding that data has changed the outcome, then suddenly it's impossible to look at it, not look at it.
Exactly. Hi, Dr. Ali. Lovely to see you. Great, he says. Thank you so much for your comment. Exactly. It's like you said, if we are missing out, if we are not acknowledging our emotions, we do not have the full puzzle, do we?
Exactly.
We are missing crucial pieces to
absolutely, and other people are going to suffer from that. And that's kind of what I was saying in the workplace environment. If you manage other people, then obviously our own ability to manage our emotions and know and learn from them will allow other people to do the same. If we don't do that and we model something completely different, we end up in really difficult working relationships that can destroy teams and make people leave and create turnover and all of these things. And I've seen that happen. And it can be swapped. And if the managers as well are aware of that, you create like a positive ripple effect.
Yeah. I don't know about you. We're running out of time, but sometimes I've coached maybe somebody for 3 sessions, and just having those 3 sessions, and you think how much they get from that and how much they sort of realize about themselves and their strengths, their emotions and everything, and how that helps them so much. And you think, wow, that was just a few hours and that's changed your life for now. Of course, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And it's just like, how simple was that? If we all had this, if we all had access to this, I mean,
that's exactly why I became a coach.
Me too.
It was because I wanted to help people find what I had found and understand, not be scared of themselves anymore, and see themselves, be curious about themselves rather than judgmental.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Of course, when we're helping others, it helps us as well. Dr. Sagu, enjoy being here. We enjoyed having you. Thank you so much for your participation. And so, Jen, I can't believe the time is up. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you all day. I'm so excited about what we have coming up. Oh, hi, Tamara, just before we go. Lovely to have you here. I had to work very hard at managing my emotions at work in my previous role. I literally had to make a conscious effort. And thank you so much. And I'd just like to say, thank you so much for saying that. And I think that's one thing we didn't mention. It is work. It's hard work. Like, it's not, we're not saying this is a quick fix. It's easy. This is hard. And some days I feel like this is just so difficult, having to process some emotions, but it's the way through, isn't it? The only way is through.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to do is acknowledge Tamara, because that's having done and made that conscious effort is so important. And I really do believe we we all do this, we'd have a much, much, much nicer work experience, and just generally experience in life. But like you said, it is work, and it has to be conscious, and that's why sometimes having help is useful. Having help from a coach or somebody else to help you with that. But the only thing I'd say, the last thing is it doesn't have to be always as hard as we think. It can also be fun.
True.
And
True.
I do that with our clients as well.
A mix. It'll be a mix of emotion.
But it can be fun. It can be fun learning about yourself.
True. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tamara. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, Jen. And I'm so excited because I know we have some exciting projects coming up in September, which we will be talking more about that later. But how can people find you?
So I mostly through LinkedIn. So just go to my LinkedIn profile. Everything's there. I have all my clients' recommendations on there. My email address, everything's on there. My website, I'm just redoing it. So that's why I'm kind of directing you to my LinkedIn for the moment.
Amazing. And Jen will put the questions that you can ask yourself when you pause, when you're feeling an emotion and you pause. I'm sure they'll be very helpful. Please, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to message us directly or comment on this feed, and we will get back to you. And thank you so much, Jen. It's been amazing as usual. And thank you to everyone for commenting. We really appreciate your thoughts on this. And I will see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you so much.